Does your front end do this? This front suspension was rebuilt roughly 600 to 700 hours ago. I added grease zerks to it at that time, and you can see it didn't help a whole lot with the factory Polaris bushings and pins. So today we're going to completely rebuild the front suspension on this Ranger. I'm going to do this front and rear. This portion will be just for the front end. This machine's got about 2,400 hours on it, 16,000 miles. This would be the third time this front end has been rebuilt, possibly the fourth. This time we're going to use better products. We are using all balls racing suspension components. We've got wheel bearings here for the front. These are your A-arm bushing kits, and this is their version of the ball joint. And actually, for the cost, these are very, very competitive, if not sometimes cheaper than what you're buying from Polaris. Supposedly the bearings are improved, they've got better seals in them. The bushing kits, they tell me, are neoprene bushings, but the big improvement is the sleeves that slide through them. The reason these machines have suspension failures is the bushing wears out, which allows it to lose the seal between the sleeve and the bushing, and that will allow your dirt and water entry and wear them out very rapidly. So by using a higher quality collar, they have, and this is all from them, I haven't used it yet, but they claim to have used a high enough quality sleeve to take care of that wear issue. So we'll see how long these will last. Anyway, we're going to do front and back on this machine. All new brakes. This is actually the first set of brakes this Ranger's going to have. It's went all its life on the same set, thanks to EBS clutching. So I will tear this apart kind of step by step, and you can see how to go ahead and rebuild the front end of your Ranger. If you've never torn into the suspension of a Polaris Ranger before, they're very simple. Go ahead and unbolt your brake caliper. If I can find the bolts here. Right there, 15 millimeter. Take both of those out, that caliper will slide off. And then remove your bolts here, upper and lower, for the ball joints. Also your tie rod nut, there's a cotter key down there for that. Take that out, pull the bolt out. Once all that's off, you can remove the spindle. Actually, you've got to take this cap off and remove that CV. Let's see if I can pry that off. To remove that cotter key and castle nut. Once all that's removed, the spindle will slide out of the upper A-arm and slide out of the lower A-arm. Also, you will have to remove the bolt for the shock. From there, you can move back to your retaining bolts for the A-arms. One thing I'll show you here, a common problem on these 800 series Rangers. See how much slop there is in that inner CV boot, or CV shaft? That is all in the splines between the CV and the differential. There is no seal between the splines of this shaft and the splines in the diff. So that's all open to water, dirt, just basically the elements, and what happens is it rusts and it wears out. So you get a lot of slop up and down. These have been replaced at about, I think about 800 hours ago. They're just as bad as they were then. They're pretty terrible right now. But what I wanted to show you is, you notice how close that boot is to this tab right here beside the A-arm. It's almost touching, nearly. What I do with these, and this is your own preference, but I take either a Sawzall or a grinder. Preferably I use my plasma cutter. I lift this CV way up out of the way. I wrap it up in a glove or something protective to protect the boot, especially if you can't get this removed because it's seized. Take and just zip that flush to the top of the A-arm. The key there is to be quick, not put a lot of heat in it because you don't want to ruin this bushing. But I will be massaging that area. You might ask, well, why not just replace the worn parts? Well, the CV cups inside the diff are, I think, around $100 or $200. I think it's around $300 in parts only. That's if you're not paying someone to do it. Each CV shaft assembly, because that's the only way they come, are about $300. So you figure both sides, you're around $1,000 to do something that's just going to go bad again in a very short period of time. Just keep running these this way until they strip out, and then put the money into them. There's just really no point in throwing good money after a bad design. So get as much good out of them as you can. Another common problem on these is you will not be able to get the bolts out at times. They will be so rusted into that sleeve inside that you can't get them to slide out. In those situations, you're forced to use a Sawzall, which doesn't work so good, but a die grinder, like a small cutoff wheel on a die grinder, works really well. Just cut through the bushing and through the sleeve, and that will cut the bolt also. And you should be able to pivot it out of there. If not, you may have to cut both sides. But that's about the only way to get it out. I have a plasma cutter, and I know that's kind of cheating, but you can nip the bolt head off on either side with the plasma cutter real quickly without damaging anything, and then that will slide right out. But that's about your only option when you're faced with those seized bolts, and it is almost a guaranteed problem if your machine's been together for a long period of time. Here we've got our new ball joints in. Much heavier snap ring on the all ball joints. Big heavy boot on there. Really like that. Here's the old bushing or sleeve and the new sleeve. This is actually, looks like a chrome sleeve to me, which is really hard. There's no way that's going to wear as fast as this mild steel piece that Polaris offers. See that ring groove there from the bushing on either end? This was brand new. I think it was 600 or 800 hours ago I did this. All that wear is from the rust, and that's with regular greasing at every service. It was still capable of getting that much dirt and water in there. Once they lose that sealing ring there on the edge, because of the softness of this steel, pretty much anything can get into there, and you start getting, see how dirty that grease is. So the grease was there, but with all the dirt, it almost made it more abrasive probably than it would have been dry, just because it would hold all that dirt in place. So it'll be interesting to see how these match up to the OEM stuff. These bushings don't feel anything special, but they do seem different than the Polaris ones. Apologize for my voice. I'm starting to get hoarse from being sick here, so you have to bear with me. So we'll get these put in these A-arms, and then I will get a new bearing put into the hub. We'll go back together. This is your hub assembly. Remove that snap ring there. Flip it over, and then drive out the bearing on this side. There's some notches there for a punch or an air chisel. I like to use an air chisel, or you can use a socket, something that fits in there, and just drive it out. Set it up in the vise like this so that you can drive the bearing out downward. Going back in, you'll want to use a piece of flat iron like this. You want to put it on top of the bearing and use that to drive it in. Don't hammer on the races. That will damage the new bearing. Here we are, almost finished. I had to put a new hub on this assembly. The old one had a little bit of a groove there that you could cut your fingernail on. It was a little wobbly in the bearing, so I stuck a new hub on it. I think that was from a previous failure, but so we got a new bearing pressed in, or put in. Forgot to mention, use anti-seize in the housing and around the bearing when you drive that in to help it come out easier next time. If you have to change a hub, hit each of these with a hammer and a brass punch. Just give them a good whack. That'll loosen them up, help them to be easier to remove. Down here, I've already got the lower A-arm on, already massaged that area there. Put anti-seize on your bolts, put a little in the sleeve. Don't be chintzy about it, that'll help you get them apart next time. Get these bolts tight. I mean tight. Don't get them snug like it says in the Polaris service manual. Snug is for wusses. Get them tight. If you don't, and this loosens up, it'll egg shape your mounting holes. And that's tough to fix. So put it back together the way you took it apart. Check your steering boots out, make sure they're okay. Check your tie rod ends. This is ready to go back together and do the other side. Thanks for watching.